What is up, everybody? Welcome to episode 62 of Sales Stories in Real Life. I'm your host, Alex Bruschi, and this is the show where professional salespeople and marketing professionals share stories about memorable buying experiences. Today, we've got one of my favorite marketers out there, Chelsea Castle, in the house. She is the Senior Director of Content and Brand, a former journalist who also has a former life in agencies where she was nominated for a Webby. She also built out content programs for high growth SaaS startups. Chelsea, so much fun that we get to do this. Thank you so much for being here. I heard you had a really interesting experience when you bought yourself a car. What the heck happened there? Before we get started, I want to introduce you to Lead Feeder. We all know the struggle of identifying website visitors and turning them into valuable leads. Imagine having the power to identify companies visiting your website, track their behavior in real time, and seamlessly integrate it all into your CRM. With customizable notifications, lead scoring, and GDPR compliance, Leadfeeder is changing the lead generation game. Head over to leadfeeder.com, LEADFEEDER.com for a demo today. Now, back to the conversation.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Alex. Stoked to be here and share my story. As I said, I have lots of fun sales stories to share. So this one, it's good if this is the winner. Do we just jump right in?
Jump right in.
Sweet. Okay. So the year was 2022, 2 years ago. I'm very pregnant at this point. My husband and I are like, okay, we need to buy a second car that's a little bigger, of course. That's very typical growing family, you need a bigger car. Um, at this time in the economy, yeah, 2 years ago, um, the auto industry was nuts. Like there were chip shortages, there were global supply chain issues. I don't know if this is still happening. I think it's gotten a little better, but it was actually cheaper at the time to buy a new car than a used car, at least for the types of cars that we were looking at. So in our experience, we've always had Toyotas, at least like for me, I had a Corolla, I had a Prius, he had a Prius. Like I've always been a tried and true Toyota person. So we looked at multiple options, right, of similar mid-size SUVs. Nothing too big. We weren't quite ready for the minivan. Still not. I'm sure we will one day. Not quite ready for the minivan experience yet, but we needed something bigger. So we're like, okay, mid-size SUV, RAV4, CRV, looking at some like Jeep Patriots, and I don't even remember the other ones, but like the mid-sized Jeeps. Test drove some, didn't really interact with any sellers. When we were finally ready, had it narrowed down between the Honda CR-V and the Toyota RAV4. Like, okay, like of course we have a bias to Toyota, right? That's like what I've always driven. Um, but we're like, let's just give the CR-V a chance. So the first experience we've had with the seller, we went to the Honda dealership. There's like no one else there. Gentleman walks up, and of course, like typical sleazy car salesman, stereotype. Like we always kind of have that in your head, I think, without even like meaning to. And luckily in this entire car buying experience, we didn't have any like, well, I caveat that I'll come back to that point later on. So remember that I'll come back to that point later on. This first gentleman though at the Honda dealership, very casual, very like kind of laid back, like, what are you guys looking for? Like obviously I was very pregnant. He like gave me a water right away. That was very nice. Pregnant ladies like can't get enough water. Um, and yeah, he was just very chill. I appreciated, this is an important part of the story because he eventually led us into buying a Honda CR-V, kind of like to jump to the end of the story. But he showed us the CR-V that he had. It was a brand new one. We were still deciding if we wanted something new, if we still wanted something used, what made sense for the budget, et cetera. Showed us a very nice new one, took it for a drive, didn't really like sell us on it. He was just like, what are you looking for? Why do you like it? What do you not like it? He was being very considerate, like, do you guys like travel a lot? Do you go hiking? And then after we drove it, so after we already had a chance to experience the car, um, he kind of went into some details of the car about how the CRV stands out from a child perspective. He didn't even mention that he had kids until after we drove it, which I thought was interesting. He was like, well, the Honda CR-V, the back seat, the doors open significantly more than the RAV4. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to remember that. I'm going to test it when I go compare and see if that's true. And it was true. So he gave all sorts of tips like, oh, the back seat is roomier, when you're back there with a kid, maybe you're breastfeeding, maybe you're changing their diaper, you've got more room. He kept spouting off like as somebody who had kids, multiple kids, he was sharing all these different stories as to why that car made a better fit for kids. But he was doing it in like an anecdotal way. So it just didn't feel like salesy. He was just being like human, right? That's like the goal.
Right.
Um, so we're like, okay, like that was a good experience. Like we're not ready to buy yet. We're just trying to narrow it down. We drove a RAV4 and ultimately we chose a Honda CR-V. After like a few different car dealership experiences, we found the exact one we wanted. We're very picky people. And we ended up buying it because we're like, oh, like all of those things that he had mentioned about it being better for kids, for especially the door for some reason. Like when you think about your life experience of a car and everything that you're considering when you're buying a car, I don't know why that stood out for me, but that like passenger door being able to open more when you're like trying to get out with a kid and you've got your hands full and you have the kid in your hand. Like makes total sense. But anyway, that really stood out for me and just him pointing out all of these kid-friendly features of the car. We ended up buying a Honda CR-V. It had maybe like 5,000 miles on it. So obviously it was like used, but it made sense at the time. It was the exact color inside, outside, like tinted windows, everything we wanted. We had it for about a week, super excited. We're like, oh, we're not Toyota people anymore. We have a Honda. And then it died. Yeah, it died. And we are like,
I
okay.
did not see that coming. I did
Yeah,
not
we
see that
didn't
coming.
either. We didn't either.
Oh
And I'm like, I'm
no.
pregnant. I can't be out driving this car, getting groceries, and the car dies. Like, like, yeah, threw us for a loop. So we jumped it, drove it again, and it was fine. And we're like, okay, like, we're not really sure what to do about that. Like, do we take it back? Was it just the battery? Like, what? I have no idea. So about a week later, it died again. And we're like, okay, shit, like, what do we do? Sorry, can I cuss on this show? I'm cussing.
Yep.
Like,
Keep it authentic.
literally, like, shit, like, what do we do? Like, we were just so upset, right? Like, we're getting ready for baby, getting a room ready. Like, we are also selling and buying a house at the same time that this was happening.
As if there's
Which
not enough going
is,
on.
yeah. And when we chose that, that's our fault. Um, so yeah, it was just wild. So eventually we took it back to the dealership we bought it at, and we are like, we have to get rid of this thing. And they're like, oh, it's just the battery. It's just the battery. It just needs a new battery. I'm like, why didn't you catch this? Like, if like the whole point of used car dealership, and you put it through the whole system of checks and balances and making sure it's in tip-top shape. So how did you miss that the battery just needed replaced? Like maybe that's fishy. Again, that was circumstantial, not any seller's fault. So we're like, I don't trust it. Like, I can't trust you now.
Yeah.
Like, how can I trust that car? And like, obviously should have stuck with our Toyota. Also having it for a little bit more time. I think we ended up driving it for like a few weeks. And we are like, we actually don't like this as much. Part two of the story. We're like, okay, so we're gonna get a RAV4. It's cheaper to get a brand new RAV4 than, you know, a used RAV4. We wanted a hybrid. We have a Prius. We're very happy with it. If it's SUV, we're just very environmentally conscious people. So we wanted a RAV4 hybrid, tinted windows, everything else we were open on. But the most cost-effective choice at that time in 2022 was to buy a new car. At the time, I'm really curious if it's like this now. You had to get on like a wait list for like allocated new cars. This was legitimately like everyone I knew who was trying to buy a car at this time. The housing market was actually kind of similar. 2022 was a wild year, y'all, where we had to get on like a wait list for like an allocated car. So we went to our local Toyota dealership downtown here in Nashville, and the gentleman was so the seller that we worked with was very um like nonchalant about it. Like explained the process, explained how it worked. Like you put down a down payment, and then we basically put you on the list, and it'll take like 3 to 4 months. We're like, okay, like we'll do it. Like he didn't have to sell us. He didn't try to sell us. He gave me his card. to kind of follow up on next steps, get the payment taken care of, get details, etc. So when we did that, we literally handed this guy a sale. We went home, called him the next day to get everything taken care of, and he didn't answer the phone and he didn't call us back. And I'm like, okay, do I give this guy another chance? Like maybe he's just busy. Like they're the only dealership, Toyota dealership within like a 10-mile radius. 10 miles is not very far, but we're like, it's just convenient, to work with this particular one.
Yeah.
So I called him again a week later and he still never called us back. Like we were literally handing him a sale of like a 40 plus $1,000 car. So we're like, okay, like screw him. Like we're literally handing you a sale and you're not like you can't even call us back. So I guess tip one is just like speed to lead, like respond to people who want to give you money.
Yeah. No
Yeah.
kidding. And
So we
so
went, yeah, go ahead.
no, no, I was gonna say because now we went through a whole roller coaster here. We tried the CRV. The CRV died. We're trying to buy a RAV4 now, and we can't even buy a RAV4. So now
Yeah.
where do we go next?
Yeah. So we went to a different Toyota dealership about 20 minutes away. It was probably a little more than that, about half an hour outside of Nashville, not far. But still drive, whatever, with a baby, a newborn, etc. So give them a call, and I speak to this lovely older lady named Lydia. Lydia then becomes my best friend for the next like 6 months of trying to get this car. I explain the story, I explain what we want, and she's like, "Yep, I got you. This is what everyone's doing right now. We can't seem to get cars in fast enough. Everyone wants a car. We don't have the parts. Toyota dealerships, like, they don't have chips and parts, and it's just like a mess." So we tell her what we want, and she's like, okay, like she sets expectations from the beginning of we may not be able to get exactly what you want from colors to seats to sunroofs to packages, etc. But I'll basically call you whenever we get something in. It'll be in this amount of time. You put a down payment in. I end up talking to Lydia probably every week. I start calling her like every few weeks for an update. And then she gets to the point where she's like, would you like me to give you a call and like let you know where things stand every time we get like the allocation list? Like how dealerships work. You get like a how ever many cars you're allotted this week. So she did. She started calling me like every week or two whenever they would get the list in because she knew that I valued communication and she was actively listening to what I wanted. I was also handing her a sale. She didn't have to go through any other like nice steps with me. She didn't have to like nurture me. Like I was already being like, I want to buy this car. Can you sell me this car?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, we eventually, she was a grandma. So like sometimes she would be calling me while she was like picking up her grandson. And then in Nashville, this is maybe a Southern thing, like to tell you everything about themselves. So like they're very open. Like I've gotten to know my like HVAC guy very well. Like people are just very open. So I got to know Lydia very well because she was just a sweet Southern gal. Um, would always hear her grandson in the background. Eventually I had my baby. I had my baby before I got my car. So I just got to know Lilia very well. And by the end of it, when she's like calling me, she's like, I'm so excited to tell you, like, I finally, like, your car is finally in. Like, or this is like the car that we have. Like, do you want it? And we're like, oh, like, do we really want that color? Do we want that package? And we're like, let's just get the car. Just get the car
After all that.
after all that. So then a few months later, car finally comes in. Again, she's calling us and giving us updates the entire way, handling all of it, all of the logistics, again, for a sale that we just like put in her lap. And then by the end of it, we roll up. My daughter's 2 months old. We're like excited to finally get this car. And she's not even there to give us the keys. I actually found out that she was at the hospital because she had just found out she had cancer. So this woman that I had gotten to know this entire time, we were like, "Oh, you're so sweet, even so kind, like helping us, like dealing through like a very, on our end, first world frustrating situation, just like ups and downs of what's happening here." Um, and then that was like so heartbreaking. We like ended like just walked in and they were like, "Oh yeah, she's not here. Like so and so is going to be like signing the papers with you and handing you your keys." So like, what do I do for this lady? So I like sent her flowers. I'm like, what do I do for this like sweet lady? Um, and all of those roller coaster steps of the story. It was just like I literally put like a sail in her lap and she still listened to me, communicated to me, like treated me like a human, made sure that everything was like left in like nice order when she had like her own extremely insane, horrible life shit happening. Um, and then even after, I think last year she like called me on my birthday and like wished me happy birthday, which is really sweet. So like if I know if I ever need a car, like I'm gonna go back to Lydia, who is luckily still in good health.
Oh my God. I'm like, I'm like taken aback. And
Me
every
too. I was
single,
like, I didn't know it was that crazy.
yeah, well, every single time you were like going in one direction, I'm like, oh, okay, here's the climax of the story. And then it just like kept going for a huge roller coaster ride. Okay. Oh my gosh. I have a lot of questions to ask. Thank you for the absolutely riveting story. Um, can confidently say there was about three, four times I thought I knew what was going to happen, and then something different happened. The thing that's like I haven't been able to stop thinking about since you said was the Honda CRV, the salesperson that was so great and pointed out all of these different selling points versus the RAV4 very nonchalantly, like, oh, the door opens wider and all stuff like that. Like that objectively is just saying something factual about what's different. It's not like, well, our design is better, and we got a better ranking on, G2. Obviously G2 isn't for cars, but you get my point. It was like it wasn't it wasn't anything subjective that he was using as a differentiator, right? Like it
Right.
was purely like factual. It's like our door opens wider, we get better gas mileage, right? I'm just giving an example.
Yep.
So that I think is a cool takeaway for sellers of like stating factual differences is different than like trying to create an opinion based differentiator, right? Like everyone is
Hmm.
going to have their own opinion, but like facts are facts. So I thought that was kind of cool. When you went back to them, and actually, maybe let me ask you a question first. During this whole RAV4 ordeal, when you're talking with Lydia weekly, do you still have the CRV at this point? Is it just like
No, we
you
gave it back. We were like, we don't want this.
just gave it
So then we
back?
were at one car. Yeah, we were, which is not a big deal. But yeah, we were at one car and we were just
That's
waiting for
but
another one.
I mean, talk about a full 360 though. What I'm struggling with is as the salesperson of the Honda CRV, right? Like when someone comes in and it's like the car died, what happened, right? Like or like we need help, and to just kind of like dismiss it as like, oh well, it's the battery. And like to your point, well, shouldn't you have checked that, right? It's almost like that's the fall on the sword moment, like
Hmm.
that's Chelsea, I'm so sorry, right? Like, that's my fault. I should have checked that, right? Like, correct me if I'm wrong here, but like, was there any way at that point that you think they could have saved that? Or like, was the
Mm.
circumstance just so beyond um reproach that there was just no way you guys would have ever gone with them again? Or do you think, like I said, maybe if they fell on the sword and there was, hey, you could try one, two, three, and we'll pay for all of it? What was there any way that they could have rectified that situation, you think, or was it too far gone already?
Yeah, no, that's a good question because I do think there could have been like a missed opportunity there. We were even thinking about it, I think, in the waiting room while we were waiting for all of that to happen. We're like, they didn't try very hard. The seller was obviously very green. She was just very young, and she like at that point, like she wasn't even really part of the equation anymore. The manager came over, and was like, "Oh, it's just the battery. We're happy to like completely, it'll be completely replaced, brand new for free. We'll make sure to show you and like make sure you're happy with it." But yeah, it wasn't quite enough. And we did say, like, why did you not like catch this? Like, that doesn't make us feel like we can trust you. And yeah, if they had fallen on their sword, if there was a little more of like a reproach there, like they could have salvaged it maybe with a different car, maybe with like another way of handling that, especially from like a monetary perspective. We were also in a different mindset than maybe some other sellers where we are very much like mama bear Papa Bear like mode of like we need the safest car, like we can't trust this. So like to a
Yeah.
certain extent, I don't know. There may not have been anything to have made us happy because they just lost our trust. Um, in something that they should have caught. That also is not a seller's fault, but yeah, could have been a missed opportunity, but also we were just like not worth it.
Well, I would have done exactly the same thing that you would have done because I think it's not just the falling on the sword. It's like you got to like match the emotion in that particular situation,
Mm,
right? It's not just like, oh,
yeah,
no big deal, right? We'll just replace the battery. It's like, no, it is a big deal, right? Like I just spent a lot of money with you. You promised me X, Y, and Z, and it is like completely fallen on its face. Like there needs to be a little bit more like emotional, like empathetic response than just like, oh, no big deal, right? We'll just
yep,
replace the battery. Yeah, no shit, you're gonna replace, right? No shit, you're gonna replace the battery. I mean, that's like pretty
yep,
like bottom of the barrel response. I think there was many layers more improved that they could have done there for
yep.
starters. And then it's ironic that, of course, you end up going back to Toyota. And I'm sure like a lot of B2B buyers have had similar experiences where like maybe they've had a vendor for a really long time. There are a lot of established vendors in every space. And like maybe you try that hot new startup and it kind of falls on its face. And then you end up
Yep.
going back to old reliable. Like what's going through your head in that moment, right? Like after the whole situation has transpired, like you spent all this time looking for the car, you got the car, it's died twice in a week, and now it's like, all right, like are we never leaving Toyota again? Was there ever a moment where it was like, oh well, maybe we should try a different company, or was it just like the Honda salesperson was just like that convincing, if you will, with those differentiators? That it was like, okay, we'll give it a chance based on this, but now we're Toyota again for life, or what's going through your head there?
Yeah, I think I might be Toyota for life now. The points you've made are so excellent, like matching the emotion and everyone, and like the points about the Honda salesman, because he wasn't just stating facts objectively, but he was relating to it on a human level by being like, I have kids, and I remember when I would have to change a diaper in the backseat and need more room. So like, and you can't always do that in every scenario, right? But
Yeah.
anyone, even in that scenario, if you're not, a parent, you can find ways to relate on a human level. So bringing that back to your question, it's like on a human level, I've built trust in the same tried and true car, a Corolla, a Prius, a RAV4. They've never failed me. They've minimal maintenance. Like it's something I tried and true and trusted. Yeah, that one experience with that Honda, which is not really Honda's fault. It was the dealership's fault, but it did taint that experience, like in my memory for sure. And I think it's almost the same thing where when I'm traveling, for example, like on a road trip, I will most likely stop at a Starbucks because you always know what you're going to get. But if I'm in town, I'm going to go to like a local coffee shop, that sort of thing. But go to Starbucks because I know exactly what I'm going to get. Everything's going to be exactly the same. So it's kind of the same sort of psychological experience with the car, where it's like I know what I'm going to get. It's going to be a high quality car. I know what it's going to feel like, drive like all of the things I know what I'm going to experience. So that I think we're, very risk averse. So I'm more likely to stick with what I already know works and feels good. It's almost like you go to the same restaurants, you tend to get the same things. Like you want to stick with what you know works. And I think other, selling experiences are the same.
Many of us are like that, for
Yep.
sure. And it's funny. Speaking of road trip, I say that jokingly. I still can't get over the salesperson that you're trying to put a deal in his lap. Oh, yep. Hey, give me a call back next week. And just never never reaches back
Yep.
out. And then oh my God, the humanity. You got to drive 30 minutes outside of town, to go to a different dealership. But it's just like
Isn't that crazy?
the bar is so low. Like I make an emphasis on this because I feel like so many people think that sales is so difficult, but yet at the same time, like
Mm,
the bar is so low. And I think something that we forget in the bog of like sales tips and whatever tips is like sales is a service, right? Like if you are a salesperson, you work in service, right? Like answer the phone when people call you. Answer people over email as quick as you can, right? When they have a question. Like just those basic level things will separate you from so many other salespeople. It's like so outstanding to me. Even something as small as like if somebody asks a question and you don't know the answer, and it's going to take a few days to get an answer, send a reply. Hey, I got your message. I will get back to you as soon as I can. Just just
Yep.
just those little things, it blows my mind. I mean, how frustrating is it to be in a situation like that where you're like, hello, I'm trying to buy something. You saw me a week ago. Where are you? What's
Yep.
going through your head there?
Yeah. Isn't that crazy? Like literally everything you just said was our exact thought. We're like, well, fine. Like if you don't want our money, I'm not going to keep calling you just because you're convenient. Like that's a 40K plus like commission for you right there.
Seriously,
Um, so it was nuts. Yeah. I mean, it's
insane.
kind of similar to like you think about how long it takes to hear back from a vendor when you're filling out a form for a demo. We did research on this when I was at Chili Piper, where like the majority of people across industry, stage, company size, revenue, like across all of those facets, and the majority of people don't respond within a week. So it's like, yeah, like you're saying, the bar is so low, it's not hard to respond to people and also like act like a human. Like I handed a cell in Lydia's lap and she treated me like she just like nurtured the relationship the entire time and she didn't have to.
Going back to the chili pepper research, that's so fascinating, and it's so funny too because companies like put together all these programs and all these marketing campaigns and all this SEO and SEM, right? And like you do so much to drive demand, and then someone's like, "Hi, can I talk to someone about buying?" And you take forever to get back to them. Totally blows my mind. I love how after all this though, Lydia is the one who got to kind of bring it home, and like you said, like and she's so warm and and you get to know her and she's calling you when she's picking up the grandkid and it just like gives you the warm and fuzzies in all the good ways and it's like a very frustrating situation when you're like I gave you my down payment, like I want the car, we're using one car. At this point, obviously you had the baby, but it's like, okay, I've got a new child. Like, we need the space. Like, come on. So it's like a frustrating experience that she's nurturing you through as well. And just that little element of humanity and to your point, relatability, all super, super important. So we've got a lot of sellers that are listening to the show, and I'm sure folks can draw many parallels between this and a B2B sale. What would be the one big takeaway that you'd give our sellers through all this roller coaster of a car buying experience, Chelsea?
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna sound simple, but to your point, like you just mentioned about the bar being low, it's really not simple, but it's like be as human as possible in your email, in your cold call, and like every interaction. Even in my B2B selling experience, there are a lot of people that I will always remember, a lot of AEs I will always remember because of how they treated me, how they like either sent gifts or thought, not just gifts, but like thoughtful, meaningful gifts that like were not just a book a meeting. Really meaningful experiences. So just remember that, like, talk to the person that you are selling to like they're a fucking person. Like they're a human. Like just talk like a human and treat them like a human, and they'll remember it and they'll appreciate it.
It's like but that involves doing things that are unscalable, which is I think where the disconnect is like the more human you are, it's almost like the harder it is to scale. And so for people that can bring that humanistic touch, I don't even know if that makes sense. But I think you catch my drift. That's this one of those things that I don't think we could ever be reminded of enough. And I think it's like really impactful to hear you say, like, I still remember all those AEs. Like if you're ever going to need a vendor in those spaces and you remember those AEs, like they're going to be one of the first people that are going to get a crack at it. Um, huge, very, very valuable. And of course, thank you for your perspective here as a marketer as well. Because obviously we're on the same team, but sometimes we're kind of looking at it from a different angle. So I think these marketing perspectives are always fantastic. And I mean, my gosh, you gave a lot of the salespeople a run for their money with the storytelling abilities. I'm like literally on the edge of my seat over here, like leaning all the way over on my desk now. Um, why don't you plug some with the audience, Chelsea? What are you up to? What are you working on? What comes next? How can people find you?
Yeah, I'm actually working on some cool writing frameworks and some more email frameworks. So, content for both sellers and marketers. So check me out. You can just follow me on LinkedIn at Chelsea Castle.
Find Chelsea Castle on LinkedIn, spelled like Castle, or Casterly, we said. No, I'm only kidding. Um, Chelsea,
Yeah,
this
it's
is an
Castle.
absolute blast. Thank you so much for joining Sales Stories in Real Life, fam. We will see you next week.
Thank you.
Cheers.